And we begin in Washington, where federal lawmakers are now circling the wagons and preparing to dig much deeper into Governor Tim Walz and his handling of Minnesota's widespread welfare fraud. On Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee has just dispatched urgent letters to a number of high-ranking Minnesota state officials, informing them that Congress, they're seriously looking into the matter and inviting them to testify during a series of upcoming in-person interviews. Furthermore, those letters go on to warn the Walz administration officials that if they choose not to honor the request, the committee may be forced to take much stronger measures to find out what they know. And I think they know more than they're letting on. The committee chairman says they're taking such extreme action because a number of whistleblowers have made it crystal clear that American taxpayers have been seriously defrauded by what's going on in Minnesota. And basically, they've had enough. Also claims there are now legitimate questions as to whether or not Governor Tim Walz and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison knowingly failed to act and were therefore actually complicit in those crimes. Among the state officials invited to attend the hearings on Capitol Hill, executives involved with Minnesota's food and nutrition programs, homeless initiatives, and leaders in their departments of education as well as human services. For his part, Governor Walz still fumbling and bumbling his way through the entire mess and trying to cover his tracks as best he can. While admittedly taking full accountability for what's going on, Walz says now that his opponents are completely exaggerating the amount of fraud damage without having any proof whatsoever to back up their claims. He goes on to argue that the Trump administration is simply making up outlandish numbers, weaponizing them for political reasons, and sensationalizing those figures as an excuse to eliminate government welfare programs for people who need the most. In the meantime, a number of state officials are standing firmly behind Walz. They say current evidence shows the recent Minnesota benefit fraud to be in the tens of millions of dollars to date and nowhere near the $9 billion as claimed by U.S. attorneys. They also claim that if there's proof to the contrary, those federal attorneys have an obligation to show Minnesota the evidence so they can finally do something about it. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. This is the time of year when each and every one of us looks forward to and, in my mind, is deserving of a stellar Christmas present. And this year's carefully chosen, delicately wrapped, no batteries required gift comes to us from the courtesy of this one, Walsney Claus. Now, to save you the trouble, your News Roundup team has spent the last several days unwrapping the Minnesota-manufactured stocking stuffer and the total retail value of this holiday deal. Yeah, they say somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 billion clams. Yeah, it's one of those gifts you can't buy at Macy's or Nordstrom or, now that I think about it, pretty much anywhere else. Important to point out, this is the gift that keeps on giving, and one which taxpayers like you and I have been charged with footing the bill for. Most of us, however, never signed off on such an extravagant gift. We were kind of conned into it, and now it's the feds to the rescue to get to the bottom of what once sounded like the perfect crime. By the way, Tim Walz, trusting you to fix a disaster which happened on your watch, that would be like the former bosses at Enron saying, trust us to head up a new Fortune 500 company. Now, it's not funny, Governor Timbo. Do the right thing for your state and simply step aside or face impeachment. Now, producer Davey, don't forget that for Christmas coming up, I do want that pinball machine which you and I talked about, and maybe a pony as well. And what do you make of this guy saying that he actually wants a third term as the governor of Minnesota?
Well, we talked about it a lot, Bill. The good people in Minnesota get to decide for themselves what they think is best, what they think is political spin, and whether or not he deserves a third term. But I can't say it's looking very good for him right now. No,
it's not, especially with Mike Lindell, the fine Republican, stepping up. I think he's going to win this handily coming up next election. This guy, Tim Walz, he failed as a leader in a spectacular fashion, and he says he wants to hang out in the governor's mansion for another 4-year term. I think that's just utter delusion.